Hey, there we go. Keith Bilous, Chris Lind, Dai Manuel is on his way. Two dads in the lab trying to be 2% better here on a Friday where we drop our live show here, live in the lab with Keith Bilous. But the Friday show is always with the two dads. And I know we got a third guy coming, Dai. He's making his way across the mountains there in Vancouver. So, but today I'm really excited because this guy has been pretty busy. He's a business transformation expert, and I'm thinking he's also a life transformation expert.
I don't know about that, but we'll see. I guess we'll see from the conversations.
Dude, when you're putting in your title, you're a business transformation expert. What's there is shaking, Dai Manuel. There he is. He is.
Little glitches over here in this part of the world, but good to be here. Hi, Christopher. Nice to meet you in person or face to face.
Nice to meet you as well. Well, yeah. Well, you know what? This is as in person as probably most people will ever get to me, so it works.
Awesome.
Because your 7 kids are guarding you?
Well, when you have 7 kids, a trip to the grocery store is like a trip to Disney. So pretty much, that tells you what my schedule's like. Yeah.
So it's funny because I don't know if you saw on my little post there on LinkedIn, but I actually subtly invited another friend of the lab, a friend of Keith and Dai's, Chad Hufford. Dai, didn't Chad have 7 kids too?
Chad's got a boatload too. Yeah.
Or it's 5 or 6.
It's like you guys, man. You got a football team between the two of you.
You get to a certain point and you just quit counting. I think it was like,
is that what it is? Is that what it is? Yeah. Jeez. So I'm really
wait. I gotta ask. So is every sperm sacred or what? Like I'm just thinking Monty Python. That's all I can keep thinking. Right?
I love it.
That's all I keep thinking. And anyways, it's just 7. Oh my gosh. I got to 2 and I honestly used to think I was going to have 5, but after I had 2, I was like, I'm good, man. I'm good. What happened to you though, Christopher?
Well, 7 was not the plan. I will tell you that. We were not planning on 7. We thought we had 1 and we went, I don't want to have just 1. So we'll have 2. And then it was, I guess we're having 3. And then it was 4, and then it was 5, and then 6, and then 7. And now people go, are you done? And I go, I'm not answering that question because the second I answer it, that's when another one's on the way. So I just say, we'll see.
Any twins?
No twins. Oldest is 13.
Wow.
Dude. So, I amongst men, Keith and Dai could crack all kinds of jokes with you. So I know we're just getting used to each other here. So maybe we're going to subtly get into those jokes, but we don't learn our lesson after 4 or 5 or 6 or,
I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for the world though. I really love it. I think in the beginning I struggled with it more because I was like, man, this is like a lot. And now I look at it and go, I love. I mean, I won't say I love every minute of it. There are definitely minutes that I go, this minute in particular is not a loving it minute, but I would say for the most part, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Well, Chris, we make fun of the whole thing. And I know, you have 7 beautiful children that love you love very much. And that one day we'll hear this. So, kids, we make light of all this because one day, kids, you might go down the same path as dad. But because admittedly, Dai, right? We don't meet a lot of fathers that have 7 children, and it opens up a whole set of conversations. So when Chris came across, just the podcast world, I was like, hey, I looked at his profile on LinkedIn and on the socials, Chris, and on the business side, very interesting career you've had. I was like, oh, I could talk to the guy on the business side of things. But then when I saw on the tagline, dad of 7 kids, I was like, oh, you got to come and hang out with Dai now because I'm really curious about life with 7 children.
Well, I'm an open book, so you can, at least for the most part, my LinkedIn audience and YouTube audience, we'll see. So I won't go into too many details, but for the most part, I'm an open book.
Well, let's talk about the struggle with the juggle first and foremost. All right. Yeah. So I hear people talk about work-life balance all the time, and I'm like, gosh, it's like the world of Oz. You'll never get there. And there's no place like home. And like literally, I don't believe in work-life balance, but I do believe that we can find harmony between the 2 points. Yeah. But that takes intention, right? And I gotta understand, like, how do you and your partner manage 7, right? Like to also be able to create time for yourselves, right? Individually as well as a couple. So I mean, there's a whole lot of questions in that one question, but you take that any way you want, Christopher.
I mean, I would say there's a couple things that stand out for me. So one is you used a word I use a lot, intention. So I actually wrote a book. I haven't published it yet. It's called Relentless Intention, which is all about how intentional we have to be with our time. And so if you look at my schedule, I know what I have to do. I schedule my time. I'm constantly making priority decisions around if I say no to this, I'm saying yes to this. If I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And constantly evaluating the trade-offs with that. So that is a large part of it, which is why when people go, "Oh, are you doing this?" I'm like, "No," because the no I would have to say yes to that is actually less important type of thing. So that's a big part of it. I think the other thing, though, that in my years of doing this that has been a shift is I've really learned how much value comes from sacrifice. And so before recognizing that actually, it used to be, well, how do I still think about me? And I think there's a way to still do that in a healthy way. But for me going, you know what, actually, there's so much more fulfillment in going, how do I actually make myself more available to my spouse and my kids? And how am I actually more generous with that instead of going, how am I always making sure I'm carving out time for me? So it's actually almost kind of a reverse engineering of, well, if I put them first, then I make sure that happens. And interestingly, it always comes, it's like an abundance mindset. I never really seem to run out. And it's almost like the more I give, the more they give back and go, well, what do you need? And it's like, well, I just will give you more. So, and some of it's just being flexible. Let me tell you, with 7, when I hear people go, well, you got to do this and got to be at this. And I'm like, yeah, right. I would stress myself out. I don't have any hair to lose, but I would just lose whatever's left on my face if I was trying to make sure everything always went according to plan, because it just doesn't. And that's just life.
I love it.
It's the life. So not only, spontaneity in many ways must be intentional as well. And I know that's full of contrasts, but you got to pick your moments, Chris. Right. Yeah. Whether it's with the kids or whether it's with your partner, it's let's go. Right. It's like, let's go right.
Yeah. The opportunity is like right here, right now. So we could sit and try and think about it and over engineer it or over plan it, or we could just go, it's go, c'est la vie. Like, let's seize the day because we've got the chance. So let's take all advantage that we can.
It's interesting, Dai, because I never thought about it the way that Chris did. But when you and I first met, you talked to me how you look at your calendar at the end of the week and make sure that your colors are aligned to make sure that that the colors weight in the area of what's most important to you, your heart, your emotion, your connection with your family. Now, when I think about what Chris just explained, it makes complete sense to me where you're starting your week off going, okay, I got to make sure I'm spending time with my partner, my kids, and then everything else happens after that. And man, I can see how fulfilling your life actually is, because you don't have really a choice but to do just what you do. If you didn't, no, I'm serious. Because if you didn't, you actually wouldn't see anybody else.
No. And I think that's where even I'm relentlessly intentional about the time I spend with people who aren't my family as well. And, scheduling time and going, it is important for me to have relationships outside of my kids and wife, but I have to plan for that. And I have to, seize the moments when they come, and also be like, how do I make sure I don't go too long without staying connected? And I've had to get wildly creative, which fortunately I'm a total tech head. So for me, it's like, well, I might just have to think about this differently. When a friend says, hey, do you want to go to the Boundary Waters for a week? I'm like, no, but what if we did this instead? Like, this might be a different way to approach what traditionally I might have done.
Dai.
I think it's great. And I just keeps coming to mind because, as much as we talk about this sort of commitment management piece, which I love, by the way, so it's like wherever our attention goes, our energy flows. And I mean, what better way to plan out a week than blocking in a calendar, right? And I appreciate the discipline that takes. And all I can think, though, is, when we talk about dividing time, I'm like, how do you make it so you can connect with 7 kids? Do you know what I mean? Like, in a week to week, day to day, like, I know my own 2 daughters, hey, they need stuff. They need dad time. They need mom time. And I'm like, we just got 2. So at least we can split the difference. Right. But I mean, how the heck do you and your partner do it? Like, I just, my goodness. Cause also all those different ages, listen, I can tell you every age was a different need, right? A different thing that they required. And, holy smokes, you've got the gamut.
So there's 2 things that I've found have worked really well. It's funny, somebody actually asked me this this week. And so it's fresh on my mind.
Cool.
And one of the things is, and I just do this with life in general, is how can I accomplish multiple things by doing a single activity? So a lot of times I'm looking at efficiency and going, is there something I can do that I know will connect with all of them? And that, again, going back to sacrifice, means me saying, what do they care about, not what do I care about and how do I force them to come to me. So as a good example, they love watching some of these cheesy YouTubers who do Minecraft. I don't really get it. I used to be a gamer. I know enough about Minecraft, but they love it. And so me learning to play Minecraft, spending time with them, they're just like, dad loves being with us on this. And they all can unify around that. And it's like, okay, I can work with one of you and I meet all of your needs. But then I think going back to something you said, Keith, earlier, was being able to seize the moment. I am always watching, and it's taken a lot of time to get them to know them personally, each of their kind of nuances and needs. And I'm watching all the time to look for those opportunities when I go, they need dad right now. Like you need dad right now. And I see that. And so I'm going to stop whatever it is I'm doing and go spend time with you without everybody else. And that's, I mean, that's a lot of acrobatics with my wife. And, but we figure it out. And every day is a new day. That's for sure.
One of the conversations that have come through the lab here on Two Dads in a Lab trying to be 2% better, Chris, is screens and screen time. Yep. You're a tech guy. I'm assuming that you have been around many screens and you've been around a lot of technology in your life. Yeah. How have you introduced screen time? How do you manage it with the kids? What's some of the philosophy of the Lind household with screens?
So a lot of it, you'll hear things all over the parenting mat. Never give your kids a screen. Always give. I don't think those extremes really are terribly helpful, and they're just not practical. So a lot of this has been really treating my kids like the mature human beings they are and having open conversations with them, and then setting reasonable boundaries. So our kids have iPads. They don't have smartphones, but they have iPads. But we've been really intentional in working with them around the parental controls that we set up. I don't just do it and then tell them what it is. We talk about, hey, what are the things that are appropriate for where you are right now? Why is this important to you? I remember when we turned on the social aspect of Minecraft, we had a family discussion with all the kids about it, about what were they really hoping to accomplish with this? And what kind of risks might you need to watch out for? And how can daddy be involved in that along the way so that we can keep saying, is this appropriate? Is it not? Is anything happening that, I need to know about? And we've just created that environment where we're just really open and talk about things. So, and there's plenty of times where we go, devices are off. Like they're off. When we go upstairs after dinner and hang out, there's no devices. There's no bringing that stuff up. We're just going to spend time together as human beings.
Create some clear boundaries, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Dai.
Yeah. It's boundaries, man. I can just say, like, each daughter is its own personality, so I can imagine you've got 7 little personalities to manage.
Yeah.
And I think I've already sort of picked up on the vibe, because you said earlier, like going to the grocery store is like going to Disneyland. It's like a full family experience and quite literally a caravan experience. So what is it like? Like, how do you sort of manage all the personalities and those needs? Because I imagine everyone's got an opinion when it's like, hey, we're going out tonight. What does everybody want to do? I mean, do you even open up with that kind of question, or do you go like, you have 2 choices, this or this, and majority rules? Like, how do you do it? Is it a voting system? Like what?
I don't know that it's necessarily a voting system, and I don't know that there's a universal like SOP for how we do it. It's a lot of times it's my wife and I doing a risk assessment around, what really is the risk associated with this, and being really intentional about how much risk is there. If there's not a lot of risk, if it's going to be easy enough, we can give you the flexibility, and we have different rules based on where they are in age. Like, you're 13, your rules are different than your 7-year-old sister. And even when they're like, well, that's not fair, then we talk about it. Instead of just going, well, mommy and daddy said, it's, well, let's have a conversation about why we did that. And if you think it should be different, I'm open to hearing your perspective on it, but actually challenging them to think critically about it. It's actually funny. It may sound like, well, it's so obvious, but it's funny how often I think about this, because I had this conversation with my son the other day where he was talking about the way he was playing Minecraft. And I just sat and talked with him about, but let's talk about why you do that. And what kind of behaviors is this instilling in you? And he started thinking and vocalizing it. And he got to the end and goes, I think I don't think I should do that anymore. And I was like, interesting. You came to that conclusion. I feel the same way, but it's great that you came to that conclusion on your own. And so that kind of Socratic engagement. And I think sometimes we forget kids are a lot sharper than we often give them credit for. It's easy to think of them as like, oh, they're just little, they don't understand anything. And I'm like, man, I can have some deep conversations with my kids and they'll really engage and think critically. And I think we don't always give them enough credit.
Well said.
I don't think we do give kids enough credit for the most part, right? You said yourself at the beginning of our conversation, Chris, you speak to your children probably very similar to, it sounds like probably like I do, or even as I've gotten to know Dai like he does with his kids. They're human beings like you or I. What you have on them is just some wisdom.
Yeah.
Like that's really it, right? But yet, for the longest time, there was that I'm the parent, and I'm older than both you guys. So I would come being raised probably from that militaristic, autocratic parenting, right? So I've had to learn not that.
I did too. Because there was a lot of like, this is just how it is. And it's because I said so. And it's not that you're giving up your authority. I mean, my kids still, they know if daddy says no, they're like, daddy said. So it's not about becoming their best friend. It's just about being able to foster that relationship where you can actually talk and be seen and respected as an authority figure while still respecting and appreciating them for who they are. And some of it I've even found is, as an adult, some of the stuff they talk about, because of where we are in our life journey, we look at it and go, that's dumb. Like you're upset that somebody broke your Minecraft house. Like that, get over it. You'll rebuild it. But I've actually had to learn to go, you know what? To a 6-year-old, that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. They spent their time. And even though I don't understand it, I can put myself in their shoes and go, you know what? If I were 6, I'd be pretty crushed by that. And being able to relate with that on a level where they go, you know what? You're showing me respect, that you appreciate what I'm going through, even though I know, Daddy, you don't understand it the same way I do, but you're showing that genuine care for me. It changes the conversation.
Empathy is an incredible emotion, and to see you instilling that or I should say nurturing that in your own children, by role modeling and mentoring them with it, I think that's just awesome. I mean, I just think about the generation we want to give the keys to, right? It's like, hey, you get the keys to the car now, because I think you're going to do a lot better than our generation's done, driving this boat that we call life. And so like, I look at this next generation and I feel a lot of positivity towards them taking over, right? Like it's just, it's incredible how astute they are, but also with the access to technology and great role modeling like you're doing, Christopher. So I gotta say, like, it's really awesome to hear. And I was wondering, like, what other habits, clearly that intentional time blocking, commitment management has been a big habit that's allowed you to obviously be a great father to 7 kids, and meanwhile still an amazing partner in life with your wife. But what other little habits would you say are instrumental that's allowed you to create the space to do that?
I mean, in terms of best practices, I mean, it really is the intention about it and the sacrifice. I think those are a big part of it. I mean, I think some of the things that just are more of a mindset thing that have really made a difference is like just this deep held belief that my kids are intrinsically valuable, even if they're different, even if I may not necessarily understand them, but actually seeing that, you know what, you matter a lot and I care deeply about you. And that builds an environment where they know they feel loved, regardless of whether we come to the same conclusions. And I mean, who knows? The oldest is 13. I have no doubt they're going to get older and we're going to have our things that, send them down a path. But I think one of the other practices that I personally, just from a worldview, come from, like, I'm really set on instilling truth in them and really trying to say, hey, how do you use discernment and how do you navigate a world where things are changing all the time? And that can be overwhelming. And that puts a lot of pressure on you as a person to go, well, do I need to conform to this or do I need to conform to that? And how do I try and keep up with that? And trying to help them understand, like, there are some timeless truths that you can hold to that regardless of the shifting seas or tides of society that you can hang on to. And I think that helps prepare them to critically analyze and evaluate the world they're living in. And How it plays out, well, I don't know, but I guess I can say I'm doing my best on it.
Keith and Dai hanging out with Christopher Lynn, two dads in a lab trying to be 2% better. We're going to wrap up this episode and keep the conversation going for the next show with Chris Lynn. And Dai, I want to hang on what Chris just said, which was really around this idea of keeping truths, both values, right, Chris? Like helping your kids understanding what the center is, what that value is, and as the world rapidly changing constantly, be centered in that truth, right, Chris?
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's just it. I think that the values and the morals that I'm trying to establish in them, which again, even some of the things we talked about, which is you can disagree with someone and that's okay, but you can still treat them with care and respect as a human being. And you don't need to tear them apart because, well, they think differently about this than I do. Well, okay, that's fine. But they still matter and they're still important, and trying to really instill some of those things in them at a young age. I think as I look at the world that is so divided right now, where it seems like people can't even have a conversation without it just flying into a rage. I think that's something I hope to see different in the way they grow.
Oh man, Chris, my kids can't stop seeing their dad be crying all the time because he meets these people every single day in the lab, and they come home and say, "Hey dad, who'd you meet today?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I met this person." And then I start crying all emotional because I had this heartfelt conversation with somebody because I'm loving the connection to humans. And my kid's like, "Oh yeah, my dad loves humans." So I'm like, "Yeah, I do." So I'm hoping I'm teaching them the same thing, right? The same values, right? So listen, let's take a pause. Dai, let's come back for the next episode with Chris Lind, and let's dig into some fun topics, Chris Lynn. Travel, hotel, rental, some of the things, Dai, we asked Chad Hufford. I'm really curious about what going to Disneyland, staying in do you guys take over a hotel room floor? Like, how does that all work? So let's come back. We're going to take a pause, 4 seconds right now, and we'll see Nation on the next episode, 2 Dads in Lab, trying to be 2% better with Keith Bilous, Dai Manuel, and of course, Christopher Lynn. Hang tight. All right, we're back. Jimmy, there is the cut. Yeah, Chris and I were talking about Descript, Jimmy. So when you're making the cut here, you're like, "Oh, now I hear Keith and Chris talking about Descript." Yeah,
dude, Descript is the best tool ever.
It is.
Oh man, I'm a huge fan. That's what allowed me to do my podcast so well the last 6 months. Like it just accelerated. The only reason.
But Keith was telling me about podcast AI, so I've got other tools.
Yeah, so Dai, I've been learning about podcast AI because I have this AI newscast from this guy named listen, not me. There's a guy that does the episode. His name is Keith. It's Keith. It's not Keith. It's Keith. It's Keith. So Chris, I have an AI powered podcast over on a Podcast AI as well. So, and it's powered by Keith. Yeah. So I'm getting this from you guys. Sorry.
Well, what's funny is it was your AI voice, and at first I couldn't tell that. I was like how are you talking without moving your mouth? I was like, oh, well, you got the stream deck going.
It's like this.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
I should have played that for Dai to enter the room today. It would have been.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Hey, we're back. We are back taking over the screens of the world. 2 dads in a lab trying to be 2% better with the third dad in the lab here, Christopher Lynn. Hope you guys enjoyed last episode talking about truths and values with kids, getting to know Chris. And on this episode, we want to talk fun. We want to talk life with 7 children. Lay the facts out, Chris Lynn. Lay the facts out.
Wait. What's the split, boys to girls? I never got that.
Yeah, I needed it up.
So this is actually really funny. So we had this nice pattern going. It was boy, girl, boy, then boy, and we were like, and then we found out we were expecting number 7, and we got a girl, which is hilarious because we actually we thought it was a boy, and then when she came, we're like, oh, okay, so. Balance the scales a little bit. So 4 boys, 3 girls.
That's wild. Holy smokes. Okay, so that's great. That just gives a little bit of context now as we questions. Because all I can ask is like, I know they're sort of too young for this right now, but I remember my family and I, my wife and my 2 daughters, we were away traveling for 5 years. And this is earlier on in our journey. And my youngest was like just 13-ish, maybe 13 and a half. Anyways, I found out that she just started menstruating, but it was because the dog had fished out the tampon from the garbage bin and ran around the house with it. All right. And that is what introduced me to, oh my goodness, I've got a young woman now, not a little girl daughter anymore, right? Now, and then that history repeats itself, obviously. But that opened up a whole new world for me, because all of a sudden there was a whole different landscape of conversations. Now, I know you're coming to that, but I'm wondering, how do you deal with the tough topics or even the fun topics when you got all these different developed kids, you know? Like, I'm just like, holy smokes, man. I couldn't even imagine when I'm like, you gotta have all those conversations like 7 times, man.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to one of these, like, it's this constant discernment of trying to figure out, like, what is appropriate for where they are. Different ones are at different ages. When do you kind of start having these things? And thank goodness, I mean, this is where my wife is my co-pilot on this, where we actually have this balance. And it's funny, if you talk to our kids, there's certain things are like, I feel more comfortable talking to mom about. And then there's other things that it's like, I feel more comfortable talking to dad about it. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, we'll divide and conquer and figure this stuff out. And so, yeah, that one, I don't have all the answers yet, because they're still early, but I think some of these ones, you know, we're getting there, and trying to navigate it one step at a time.
Chris, are the kids close? Like, are the 7 kids, like, are they really close as a unit, or are there cliques? Are they?
Okay, so don't grade me. Don't grade me on this, but it's 13, then it jumps to almost 10, then 8, 7, 4, 2, 1. Wow. So they're kind of, and the way I look at it is, if you were to come to my house and have dinner with us, there's shifts. Like, the oldest 4 eat together, and they kind of they're their crew, and then that shift ends, and I take the oldest crew upstairs, and then mommy brings in the second shift of the babies to kind of, you know, get that all taken care of, because it's a little too, you have 9 people in a kitchen, they're just it's just too many people.
Man, that is awesome. I love it. I just keep thinking like Brady Bunch. I used to love that show. You know, like, dude, this is epic. So, what is it like? So, logistically, when you guys decide to have a family vacation, what the hell do you have to do? Like, I can imagine it's just kind of like the amount of logistics you have to plan. No wonder you're so good at logistics and planning and intentional use of time, because I don't know how else you would be able to do this. You know, and
so I think.
Yeah, please describe it.
So I mean,
your last trip.
So first of all, one, there's probably a lot less trips than people with smaller families, because with big families, you just kind of figure out, how do we be a little bit closer to home? And that's why, you know, if you come to our house, you'll see, like, why do you have the world's largest playground in your yard? And it's like, well, because they need to have fun, but going to all these things, it's not something we can just drop. Oh, hey, this weekend, do you want to go do this? Like, no. We got to plan months well in advance on top of some of that stuff.
Well, and it costs some cash.
That's just it. We go to McDonald's and you're like $120, and you're like, okay, you know, and that's the dollar menu. So, so I think, that's another component, is it can get really expensive. But even just the logistics, like for us, if we go somewhere, it's got to be like a weekend trip. Going back to, is the juice worth the squeeze? You're just like, it's not worth it.
A weekend trip wouldn't be worth it.
No way to spend a week packing, preparing, getting everything together, to then drive and then be there for a day. By the time you unload the car and get everybody settled, you're repacking it again. And you're like, nah, it's not worth the time. Yeah. And like hotels, you were asking, like hotels, we did hotels up to, I think, 4 we tried once, but it had to be like a residence in 2-bedroom. And even that was miserable. So thank goodness for Airbnb, and you know, that where you're like, okay, I remember we went to DC a couple years back, and we're renting a house, and we just there's just no way around it. And then we've got a big, pretty hardcore truck. It's a big 12-passenger truck that we got this thing decked out. It's got a lift kit in it. Cause I'm like, I'm not going to be the dad driving the hotel shuttle. Like, if we're going to drive around, we got to look like the SWAT teams pulling up to the soccer field. And so this big blacked out truck with big knobby tires and a roof rack and all that stuff. And yeah, most people think like the feds show up. We're like, no, it's just the Lins. You're like, okay, whatever. So
dress up in like the Men in Black outfits. I can see all 9 of you hopping out with the sunglasses
well,
on.
What's funny, we were in the parking lot once, and this one guy came up and he joked with me. He's like, I was not expecting to see a bunch of kids with Happy Meals jump out of the car when you got out.
Say no more. Say no more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Is the 13-year-old a female or male?
He's a boy.
He's a boy. How close? Okay. How close is your oldest son with the 2-year-old? Is he like, because there's quite the gap there. So is there like big brother parental type guidance there, or is there kind of or is there no interest right now as he's getting into teenage years?
No, it's funny because with the family this size, everybody kind of chips in and hangs out together, and we're used to hanging out together as a family. So it's not like they're buds, but there's lots of times I'll find my 13-year-old sitting on the floor reading a book to his brother and just kind of hanging out with him because he just likes hanging out with him. Or my 4-year-old will come up and I'll watch and I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, we're just watching, and it's clearly a kid show that I know my 13-year-old doesn't want to watch, but he's like, well, but Harrison wanted to watch Cars, so I thought I'd watch Cars. And I'm like, you kind of like it. And he's like, yeah, I know, because I know you like they all know I like cartoons just as much as anything else. So they're kind of seeing that. But yeah, no, even the oldest, they're good little caretakers. I mean, I wouldn't trust them like overnight, but for a little bit, yeah.
I would imagine that it makes it easier for you and your wife to leave from time to time with the 13-year-old with the older crew shift, right?
We're not there yet. Again, he's a boy and I love him, but I don't know that I would trust him without at least a mom and dad that he could go, hey, something happened. I need your help.
Hey, Dai, that tells us a lot about Chris. Chris must have been some badass that he's because we know kids watch their parents, right? So
I'll tell you though, like that many kids, that's super impressive, but also it's inspiring, Christopher, to also just hear how you've navigated the additional kids as they keep coming, right? Because obviously I met people with larger families, right? Like they were trying to explain to me, when you add one, it's just one extra. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. And I'm like, I just don't know.
I hate when people say that because I'm like, that is not helpful. That is not helpful. And it is not just like, oh, you just roll with another one.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? I'm like, okay, if I had a third, that's 50% more than I got now. That doesn't sound like fun to me, okay? It's like, I think I'm good with 2, but people just kept telling me, it's just one more. It's not a big deal. And I'm like,
I mean, there are economies of scale.
Here. He's got 7, and he tells me that's not true.
Here's the truth. Are there economies of scale? Yes. There are definitely economies of scale, which I think helps. And as the older ones get older, they can help a little bit more. So it does help. But when I hear people go, oh, yeah, after this, you just add one more. It's no big deal. It's like, are you kidding? I see my grocery bill every month. Like, I know how little sleep I get. I know the demands of this. I'm like, it's not just, especially if you're really invested in your kids. If you're invested in them, then, it's more of your time and energy, but it's worth it in the long run.
Well, yeah, and that extra kid goes from maybe a 6-passenger vehicle to a 7-passenger vehicle, or 7 to 8, or
When we found out we were expecting number 6, that was like the crisis mode, because we're like, what do we do now? Because we have a Suburban, but Suburbans technically hold 8.
Yeah,
not comfortably.
8, though.
Not comfortably.
Yeah, it's not holding 8 of me, believe me.
Yeah, and so then you're like, well, what do we do about this now? And it was one of those like, well, I don't know, like, and there's not a lot of options on the market, and we had to buy it from Utah, which makes sense.
That
but
sense. Well, as soon as Christopher says that, I'm like, that makes total sense. I got a bunch of buddies in Utah. I know they're laughing at that too, because they're nodding. They're like, oh yeah, I've got one of those.
Yeah, everybody in Utah is going, yep. Of course he would order it from Utah.
Just buy the bus. Just buy the bus. Like, no.
I know.
Oh, man.
Let me ask you this, Christopher, because I know we're getting tight on time, but I want to. I was curious, like, is there anything that drives you nuts? Like, is there people that have misconceptions about people with big families that just, it drives you nuts? Like they just presume certain things that maybe aren't true, or just things that you think are maybe just completely irrelevant as being someone on the other side of that fence that actually lives with us every day. I'm just wondering if there's like any sort of ignorant sort of statements or things that you come up against frequently.
I mean, there's tons of ignorant statements. And I think sometimes it's just people don't encounter people with big families. And so it's hard for people to process it. And so, I mean, I'm the same, like when you don't know what to say, sometimes you say the stupidest things. And I will say, there are lots of times where I hear things come out of people's mouths and I'm like, did you just say that to me? Like you've never even met me and you just said that. And so but I get it, because for me, it goes back to like, I recognize it can be uncomfortable. You're uncertain, or people's minds of like, they just can't wrap their head around how you do things with 7. And so I look at it and go, well, there's a genuine question behind that. I think one of the ones that I actually have made a point to just always correct is, I think sometimes just people imagine like it must be awful having that big of it. And I don't think they're cognitively thinking that, but they're just like, 7 sounds like miserable. Like, are you done? Like, and I'm like, no, actually, I mean, I don't know. And if we had more, I'd be happy about it. But again, it's not like, oh, I'm so offended that you said that. It's just more like, no, I want to kind of change the narrative, that this idea that being committed to family, and yeah, my life's different than it would if I had 2, but I don't regret it. I don't look at it and go, oh, this is a crappy hand to be dealt. I actually am like, that's an awesome hand to be dealt, which I think is great, because right now, if you look at some of the numbers, I mean, people are just having less and less kids. And a lot of it is there's concerns like, well, it's so expensive and it's all this and it's going to affect my career and it's all these things. It's like, that's a barrier you're putting on yourself.
Yes.
It does not, you are doing that to yourself. It does not have to be that way. Kids are as expensive as you make them. Your career is limited if you limit it. Like this idea that somehow kids will prevent you from being the best version of yourself, it's just not true. And I was on a millennial podcast and he was asking about it because he was curious. He's like, I'm kind of starting to wonder, but he went through the whole list of myths of why he was hesitant to go down this path. And I just went, don't believe any of it. Will it affect you? Yeah. Will you have to make decisions differently? You bet. Will it make you better in the long run? Yeah. So don't buy the lie. And you're the biggest barrier that you're going to have to overcome, not your kids.
So well said. I love that. Thank you, Christopher.
I've never thought about, well, so it's interesting because maybe my naivety gets in the way here, but I never really thought about the negative judgment on it. Somebody saying, oh, you have 7 kids. I came at it as curiosity. So when we connected, I was like, I have question after question. I want to talk to the kids. I want to talk to the mom. because that's fascinating to me, because it's unlike many of my world. And because I love the love that your family has created. You've created.
Well, and what's so funny about it is, and this is where I've seen big families. I know there's not a lot, but I know of some, and they do tend to sometimes get really defensive about it. And to your point, actually, when I have conversations with people, it's actually coming from a genuine place, like you said. It's like this excitement. It's like this, I just can't even wrap my head around it. Like, that's so cool. But sometimes what happens is it's almost this like, but I don't want to think it's cool because maybe you don't think it's cool.
Right.
So like, I'm sorry. Like, they're trying to be empathetic. And so that's where, for me, I don't ever really experience people going, oh, that's awful. They think that's what I want to hear because they imagine and they're trying to be empathetic.
Right.
And that's when I'm like, you don't need to apologize. I love it. And then the script flips and they're like, you do? And
it didn't happen by accident.
Great.
Like the birds and the bees had to happen along the way there.
Well,
I'm just a slow learner. 7 mistakes later, right? Yeah.
My mom, a family of 13, which is maybe why I like 13 brothers and sisters back from Saskatchewan, the farming days back in the 1700s, right? So, you needed all the help on the farm and all that. The farmland there, right? So,
serious question here then. Christopher, are you going to have a baseball team or what?
Yeah.
Like, dude, you've got a sub. Like, it's awesome.
Christopher.
Who knows? Well, and what's so funny is our kids all joke. They're all like, there's extra seats in the car still because you did get it. And I'm like, can you stop? can you stop? You guys are not helping matters. And they're
Oh,
like, well,
that
we
is
have
so
lots of
good.
room. I'm like,
So good.
guys, just
Oh,
quit.
man.
So,
You know what?
but I think, honestly, one of the things though that I think did change the way I thought, and it took me a while to get here, was because, like I said, when they first started, it's hard. Like, I won't pretend parenting's not hard. And so
No.
when you started getting to 3 and 4, you're like, this is really hard. But I think one of the things that changed my attitude about it was, so I grew up, both my parents were funeral directors. So I grew up in a funeral home around death a lot. And one of the things as I started thinking about this was, I never experienced a single person in my whole life who ever said, you know what, I wish I had less kids. No one at the end ever said, I wish I had not had so many. I wish I'd only had one. I wish I'd never had. No one ever said that. What I consistently heard from people was, you know, we kind of wanted one more, but we just kind of couldn't imagine figuring it out. And so for me, that was like, well, maybe I still don't fully understand this, but there must be something to it that maybe I need to change my perspective. It's not, you know, and that really affected me a lot.
Man, it's thanks for sharing that, because I just keep thinking about this situation. You know, 7 kids is just awesome. It really is. I just think it must be so much fun. Like, honestly, I'm thinking about the highlights right now. I'm not thinking about obviously the challenges that come with that as well. But I can just imagine how much fun it must be.
Yeah.
You know, but I was curious, you know, like, listen, I've been part of a lot of dads groups, you know, throughout my, tenure as a dad. And I always find it's nice to have other dads to connect with, because you can relate, you can talk about things, you can share about experiences. You know, it's just like us men connecting right now. And I'm curious, you know, because you had made note to this earlier. You had mentioned that there's not a lot of other big families that you've met or connect. So what do people do in your situation? How do you connect with other dads or parents? Like, have you found any communities for parents with, more than a certain amount of kids? Like, I mean, what do we call 7? What's the number for 7?
Do you go to Utah for those groups, or do you?
Know this number? Like, what is it? Like, I don't want to call it a gaggle. I don't think that's right.
I don't know what the term for it is. I don't know what the term. A herd.
A gaggle's like a flock of geese. It's just it's something that comes in front of mind because of Canada, right? But that's only why. I'm just wondering, what do we call this? It's not a herd. I mean, that's not very nice to say. But
what I think is funny though. What I think is funny is it's just called the Lins. That's just what it is. We have a Lind of kids.
Yeah, you have a Lind of kids. That's it. You make a logo, you brand it. There, you're a smart guy. You make a Lind, right?
Yeah, that's right. No, but I think on that connecting thing, the thing that I think is really cool is, regardless of how many kids you have, there is something unique about being a dad. And so what I found is, it's not like, oh, I've got to find other dads with big families. It's like, well, no, I've actually found communities of dads who have 1 kid or 7 or 4, or we're still facing similar challenges and we can relate to it. And while it's slightly different, you're like, yeah, but I can at least relate to what that is. And so I've actually, built a community of people that, I think the difference is the ones with more kids, they're the ones that are more creative and like, so how are we going to have community? Because it's not going to be this like every Wednesday we'll go out and do this thing. Because you're like, yeah, no, that's probably not going to work for us. But I would say in general, the other dads that I've surrounded myself with, I find our conversations really aren't dependent on numbers so much as stages of life and the kind of challenges that we're dealing with in certain stages of life. And the ones whose kids are older, encouraging the ones whose kids are younger, going, I know it feels really long right now, but like, it'll be gone before you know it. And the ones whose kids are older being encouraged by the ones whose kids are younger, who are like, that just made me remember how much I appreciate this about my kids, type of a thing. So that's been my experience.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's just beautiful. But also, I just think about I look at my wife, like, she's got 5 other siblings. So she's similar. She comes from a family of 6 kids. And I just look at that relationship and the holidays, and, now they're all having kids. So, I mean, it makes for exponential growth very quickly. And I need a vacation when I come back from her place from vacation, just because I grew up with one brother, right? My parents had separated when I was young. So it was like, I was used to small family stuff. And like, this is like,
I was
chaos.
too.
Dude, well, then, I mean, you're living it now. So.
I'm living it. Like, yeah, there's
Dude,
no, like I get to go home from it. It's like, that's just my everyday.
No, dude, you have the same pediatrician, same dentist, like for each of the, like for the kids, like because
I mean, I think that's where the economies of scale come in. Is
Yeah.
you're just kind of like, okay, we can kind of like economize this kind of stuff, and they just get to know like your personality, the family dynamics, and things like that. And they're like, oh, okay. So I think that helps because you're not trying to figure out, all the stuff. Like even with school, it's great because they all help each other like a lot with stuff. And you're like, okay, like this is cool. And that's where the younger ones in some ways are way more advanced because their older siblings are, we're spending the evenings talking about algebra, and the little kids are like, oh yeah, that's multiplication. You're like, what did you just say?
Yeah.
I was just thinking it must be cheaper for you to book day rates than to go by the hour. Like I'm just thinking about it. But I'm like, if you got to go to the dentist and all 9 of you need to get your teeth cleaned, it's like, I'm going to negotiate. I'll book you for a day. How about that? You know, like,
yeah. Can you just close the office? Just close the office and just have
like a
the
whole shift, right? Like literally, it's like, no, but
I mean, and you do, in some ways, you do kind of have to plan that way where you're like, well, we're coming and we're going to be here. So also you don't want to ruin it for the rest of your customers. So why don't you just close the office and we'll commit to being there for the day and whatever. So again, just a lot more planning.
Wow.
How often do you guys all dress alike?
Never.
I thought maybe it's one of those families.
No, I take that back. I take that back. I take that back. My wife is big on that for family pictures. Yeah. She always does. So yes, every Christmas, we always have the same pajamas. Every year, whatever. The only difference is, and the kids all joke about it. They're like, Daddy, you always wear a black shirt, no matter what. And so like, if you look at the latest Christmas picture, we're all in like the red, fleece pants and stuff like that. And then I'm in the back with a black shirt on. And they're like,
tradition now. That's what
I know.
Tradition.
I know. It's funny. If you ask any of my kids, what's your dad's favorite color? They'll go black.
Nice. I like it.
Funny.
It goes with everything. It's okay.
Chris, Lynn, we typically like to leave an actionable item at the end, but I'm not going to leave one today. I think what we're going to leave today, Dai Manuel, with a lot of love. You said something a couple of minutes ago that really struck me, which was you were raised in a house with 2 funeral directors, which you were raised in a house with a lot of death. I was surrounded by death my whole childhood. You've chosen a path of life and love. And that to me is inspiring. And anybody listening right now who maybe is going through a tough moment, I know the type of content that I'm putting out and Dai puts out is inspiring and trying to make yourself 2% better. If you're leaving this show right now after listening to us talk with Chris, life and love are powerful things, right? And making those choices, through awareness, I think is a strong enough actionable item. So, it tells me a lot about you, Chris, when you told me what your parents did and why you and your wife chose 7 children and maybe you might chose 7 more. And I got nothing but props and respect for that, man. That is because this world can use love and this world can use more conversations like clearly you are having with your children. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's honestly been a pleasure hanging out with the 2 of you. It's been a lot of fun. I don't get a lot of opportunities to sit and have the dad talks publicly. So this was a fun one. Well, and it's not lost upon me, Dai Manuel, that your time is extremely valuable, Chris. So the fact that you're able to carve out, almost an hour of your time to spend with Keith and Dai I got nothing but gratitude, man. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. No, I love paying it forward. Really, I do, because I love what I do. And I would love to see other dads feel the same way. And there's so much joy in it. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Also, not to be negative, but you're doing the world a service here, Christopher, because, those baby boomers aren't getting younger. And if there's those that are familiar with sort of some of the trends that are going to be coming down the pipe in the next 15 years, we need more kids. We need more kids. We do. I mean, all the trends, all the economists, everyone's talking about this issue we're going to be encountering in 15 years. So, which is weird, right? To think like we've all been concerned about overconsumption. It's like, well, it was the baby boomers' fault. It's like, hello. So, anyways, I just got to say,
and hey, guess what? You don't have to have 7.
no, but I think it's good to see this as an example, though, because I think that the conversations are going to switch. I I think there is going to come a point where we're going to be talking and encouraging people to have more children.
And we're starting to see that because I think a lot of the younger generation grew up with this like, oh, but isn't this like a really hardship, a tough thing to do?
Yeah.
And that's where if I can help somebody change their mind and go, you know what? No, it's awesome. And you can
hashtag the
awesome
lens.
Life.
The lens hashtag, man. Like it's, I want to see your next family photo. You got to do Men in Black theme. Okay.
All right.
Just for me.
We'll stand outside the truck. We'll stand outside the truck.
I want to print. Like it's awesome. I love what you're doing. Thanks for being here today. Keith, thanks for coordinating this as always. And man, this is just such a fun conversation. I know we need to have you back, Christopher, for sure.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And as Diamond, hey, listen, before you know it, nation, we always get 2% more advice from Dai Manuel to say goodbye. And that 2% advice today was go have some more kids. So you're not doing nothing, right? Go and have a kid tonight. A courtesy of Dai Manuel.
It's the weekend. What else are you doing?
So 9 months from June 1st, we are going to see a spike in the population courtesy of Mr. Dai Manuel and the 2 dads in a lab trying to be 2% better. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you guys soon.
Hashtag the lens. See y'all. Bye, Christopher.